Howdy. Welcome back to the Football House Pick'em Show from House and Enterprise. We're entering week 8. Sam Basil joined alongside Will Tondo, Mike Gilly, and Cole Hughes, and Jake Zimmer is going to enter the show a little bit later tonight. And there he is right now, actually. So we'll get him right on there. Welcome, Jake. We had a pretty tough week for a lot of us last week in week 7. But you know what? Let the past be the past, okay? We are more than halfway through the college football regular season. We are over the hump, and we are getting closer and closer to bowl season. So as we get closer and closer to bowl season, more and more teams are clinching bowl spots with their 6th win. So last week I had the state-of-the-art graphic showing every single team that has already clinched bowl eligibility. And this week we had a whopping 16 teams join the pool. So I'm going to show you our new updated state-of-the-art graphic right here. Up at the top, we've got the 6 teams that clinched last week: Michigan, Louisville, USC, Oklahoma, Georgia, and Liberty. But this week, we've got a smattering of schools, all with different, postseason aspirations, some playoff hopefuls, some, just trying to make it through, just trying to win their conference for the first time in a long time. And some just trying to, have a good season and surprise their fan base. So, gentlemen, first off, welcome back to the show. I hope you're all doing well. I want you guys to take a look at this graphic and let me know what jumps out to you. I mean, the first thing, if we can defer to Cole here, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, after an impressive win against USC last week, clinch bowl eligibility. Could be, some describe this win as a turning point in their season. Turning point to where? I don't think a lot of people are sure based on the rankings. But, Cole, after that win against USC, what is the ceiling for this year's Irish? I know it's changed so much this season, but right now, where do you see it?
Yeah, huge win last week for them. They played really well against USC, really needed that win. So good for them, officially bowl eligible. Like you said, it's kind of up in the air right now where they're going to end up at the end of the year. They are 6-2, so things are looking good for them right now. I ultimately think that loss against Louisville is going to come back and haunt them, unfortunately. But, we still got a couple weeks left of football. They got a couple big games coming up. They still got Clemson on the schedule, Pittsburgh, a couple good teams. So we'll see what happens with them, but I think they're going to be all right. Hopefully they can get that win against Clemson in a couple weeks and, win out the rest of the regular season, finish with 2 losses, and potentially get into a New Year's 6.
Love it. I think, as you can tell by my cowboy hat, there's a lot of Western influence on this current pool of bowl-eligible teams. We've got, obviously, Fresno State, Air Force on a tear this season, undefeated, and the Washington Huskies, as well as Oregon State in the surging Pac-12. As I'd like to describe them this season. Out of these 4 teams, obviously I think, there's 2 options here that are greater than the other. Do either Washington or Oregon State have a chance at either, Washington for the college football playoff and Oregon to a New Year's 6 bowl? I mean, could we see that happening at some point this year? I see a lot of nods, so I'm going to go with yes there. Let's check out. We'll check back in with these bowl eligible teams next week. There's a lot of teams with 5 wins coming into this week on the verge of bowl eligibility. So I'm probably going to be running out of room on my Word document here. My state-of-the-art graphic. Let's check out our standings. Interesting week. We've seen, I think a lot of us had a tough time, a lot of movement as we can see. But I think so far we're all doing pretty well, except for Zimmer. I'm sorry. You are the sole team under 500 with your pick so far this year. I finally moved on to a winning record.
Basil finally cracked it. Yeah. Cracked the 500 egg.
Tondo, you and Mike are the first 2 people to rack up over 50 wins so far in your bets this season. And Cole, You know, you're floating around the top 3 the entire time, and now you're in 5th. What happened, man?
Yeah, I don't know. I keep sliding down that slide, and it's not the way you want to be going. But we got another week this week. Let's climb back up. I like to be all over the place this year, I guess. So hopefully, when the season comes to its conclusion, I'm somewhere up near the top once again.
Gilly and I need some upsets because Gracie's picking these locks, these money line locks, and we're definitely overcompensating by throwing 30 on the board. But I need an upset somewhere.
I hear you. No, that's exactly what we need. I'm rooting for it. Taking everyone that's plus 1100.
I know. Do we have to file a formal complaint against Gracie at this point?
They're not egregious money lines. Like they're all close money lines, but they are the more favorable team. I think her only one. I mean, this week she lost. The Kentucky and Kansas, which everyone had across the board.
Yeah.
But LSU whopped Auburn. Oregon State beat UCLA, and she had a couple good over/under hits. So,
hey, she's playing it safe, and it's working for her.
Playing it safe.
I know. Part of me wonders, why don't we all do that? If we've got things to go over 500, and that's I don't know. I do this all the time. Yeah, that looks pretty good. And then next thing you know, I'm at 49% of the year. So shame on me.
Well, it'd be interesting to see too. I feel like one thing that we, maybe next year when we calculate these standings too, when it comes to betting, it's so tough, right? Because you could be 51 and 29, right? If I could single Gilly out here for a second, but I don't know the number off the top of my head. But if you look at those 51 wins compared to the 29 losses, and you look at the spread on each of those picks, how much are you running in the profit, section versus, you could be 33 and 29. And you could be making an exponentially higher profit just because you're taking the riskier picks, even though it's a lot closer. So there's a lot of different ways that we can kind of come at this. So Zim, if you're feeling bad, man, it's all right. There's a lot of ways you can come out on top. The final graphic that I wanted to talk about before we get into our picks here is our top 25. A lot of movement in this one. I feel like we've seen a lot of movement over these past couple of weeks. Outside of the top 3, that 4th spot in our projected college football playoff seeding has really flip-flopped around. I know Penn State's been in there. USC's been in there. Washington was there at one point. But yeah, look, USC's at 16. Washington's at 5. Florida State is back up in there. This has been the most movement we've seen in a college football top 25 compared to last year. At what point do you guys think we'll be ready to lock in? Or do you think it's going to be really close to, the conference championship game where we see, a definitive answer on who deserves to be in the college football playoff?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a while until we find out, to be honest. I think you're spot on, especially with the Big Ten in play. Between Penn State and Ohio State, somebody's going to be probably a contender to be in that top 4 projected. And then depending on which one of them plays Michigan, if Michigan were to lose to them, then you kind of have a 3-horse race, assuming everyone else wins out. You know what I mean? So I think it's going to be fun. And we talked about last week too, with the ACC and the chaos that could ensue there of a potential 3-way tie for the ACC champion, or for the regular season champion, if you so to speak. So I'm pumped. I feel like we're not going to know who is in the playoff, which is exciting from a betting perspective too. I have to kind of engage the futures markets to figure out who's got solid odds right now and try to get into that.
Yeah, I like Penn State in the top 4 eventually towards the end of the season. I mean, this week will probably be the tell-all tale for them if they can beat Ohio State. And we don't know what's going on with Michigan now that these allegations that I think are just, kind of funny at this point, that they are stealing signs or, whatever they're getting accused of. But if there's an organization that is against one entity, it's NCAA football and Michigan with Harbaugh. So who knows if he gets sanctioned this go around. But it'll be interesting with the Big Ten. And then can Georgia just stay on top? They're playing good football. I don't think they're playing great football. So is an SEC team going to come out and stomp them in? We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I think all four of these teams right now, they're in the top four. I mean, stuff could happen, at the end of the season going forward from this week on that, could potentially knock them out, right? I don't think they're all locks to stay in the top four. So, like people have been saying, Big Ten, a lot of teams there. You have Michigan and Ohio State, obviously, and then Penn State right on the outside looking in. Florida State, like Gilly said, in the ACC, a lot of sneaky teams there. Something could happen there. The SEC, always competitive. I think a lot of people are forgetting about Alabama at 8. They are right now number 1 in the SEC West. They are 6-1 overall. They lost to Texas earlier in the year, but 4-0 in the conference, in a really good conference. If they keep it up, they could, sneak their way in quietly to the SEC championship game. And, if they win that game, they might be right back in the discussion of a top 4 team. So a lot of teams to keep an eye out on.
Yeah, I think, if you're not, if you're someone like me who doesn't really have a dog in the race for FBS football, I feel like the best outcome for just, a fan of exciting college football is, the top 4 conferences this year, the Big Ten, the ACC, the SEC, and the Pac-12, all those championship games, right, are essentially college football playoff play-in games. But we'll see. We're 12 days away from the first official college football playoff ranking. That first ranking drops officially. It's going to be a spooky ranking because it drops officially on October 31st. Just to be clear on this Michigan story that Tondo alluded to, a report came out today via Yahoo Sports. They were saying from industry sources that essentially what Michigan has been doing is they've been sending people, according to this claim, have been sending people to scout future opponents, future college football playoff or conference play opponents to, get an idea of what their play calling signs are on the sideline. So, pending an NCAA investigation, we'll see what happens with that.
Yeah,
but
can
now,
you talk about that for a second? I just want to hear what you guys think of that. If they are doing it, do you think that they should be penalized for it? Because from my perspective, right, I think there's a difference between going to these games of future opponents and trying to study what the other teams are doing compared to, filming it or something like that, right? Because if you think about it, every week, every team watches film against teams that they're going to be playing, right? So they're kind of doing the same thing to see how their signs on the sideline match up with the plays they're running. But when you're watching film, you're looking at different formations. What plays do they run out of this formation? So I think it's kind of similar. I don't necessarily think it's cheating, quote unquote, unless, like I said, they are giving themselves some type of competitive advantage and, filming it or, doing some type of video surveillance of it. But that's just my outlook on it. I'd like to hear what you guys think about that.
Yeah, is it scouting or is it cheating? I when I read the allegations, it's like, I bet you someone is a little salty on how, Harbaugh presents himself, that they're throwing something out that they're like, oh, well, we saw them at the practice taking notes or something like that. Unless there's concrete evidence of this happening, it's all an allegation at this point.
I think, the best way to talk about it, right, is I think in comparison to the, the most recent and probably most famous sign stealing scandal of our lifetime, which is the Astros, right? And I think what it comes down to is, there's a difference between figuring out your opponent's signs in a game, in the moment, just with your own eyes, versus using, taking those extra steps and using technology, cameras, scouting other people's games to then get an edge. That's kind of like, I feel like if they do get in trouble for this, if this is true and they do get, penalized for this, I feel like that's what it's going to come down to. You're not doing it over the course of a game. You're not doing it by playing football. You're doing it with extracurricular means. And I think it's kind of tough because it's one of those things where, it's and again, like the Astros, right? Where it's like the Astros got caught doing it. They kind of became the poster child for this. They became the bad guys. But I think we'd all be lying to ourselves if we said that other teams were not doing this and we're just better at not getting caught, right? So I think the best thing that comes out of it, if you really feel like Michigan should be penalized for this, fine. I understand that. But I think the best thing that comes out of this is the NCAA comes in and is a bit more firmer about what you can and what you cannot do. As somebody who does not have a dog in the race in college football, I want to make sure that everybody who's getting advantages in the game is doing it through the right means. Because look, if you figure out what the other opponent's signs mean on the sideline, that's fair game. But I really don't know about this buying tickets to other games and scouting ahead. If that's what they're doing, because that's a little much to me.
I concur. I think it's like, are they – it all depends because the NCAA doesn't necessarily I've not read up on this, but do they have some – it comes down to, is that a policy violation or is it just an allegation, right? Right now it's just an allegation. I don't think there's any written policy that says hey, you can't do this. It's Totondo's point is probably there's an element of hey, we're out to get Harbaugh, but – I mean, there's a little bit of it that's fair game too. So I don't know. I think we're going to have to see the NCAA. This is a really big moment for Charlie Baker to figure out hey, am I going to say something about this or am I just going to get out of the way and let Michigan do whatever they want? So I support Charlie, whatever he does. Great guy, right dude to lead the NCAA, but this is a big moment for him here.
According to Yahoo Sports, in this report, NCAA bylaw 11.6.1 specifically states off-campus, in-person scouting of future opponents in the same season is prohibited. So,
oh wow, yeah.
If Michigan comes doing this, they've broken an established rule. So,
yeah. So if they are doing it, then they're breaking a rule that's already been established. So then, they should be penalized. Yeah, in my opinion.
I think they should establish it a bit further, in my opinion, because look, it's one of those things where then what about watching your opponent on TV? It's you can't prevent people from watching somebody on TV, right? So I think hopefully, there's a lot more ways to scout future opponents than buying a ticket to a game. So hopefully as we move forward, the NCAA gets a little bit more modern in their rules, right? With what technology you can and cannot use. So with that, I think let's get into our cards. Jake, I feel like, to quote Bleachers, you want to get better. So let's see how you're trying to get better starting this week with your card.
Oh man. Well, it's a level of familiarity is how I'm trying to get better, and these are all teams that have done really well. I think this Duke-Florida State game really intrigues me, and I see that on some cards here. I'm following the crowd in that area. And I'm just pulling it up here. I think it's plus 14.5 at this point for Duke. Listen, I'm impressed with Duke over this year, right? I think they gave Notre Dame a really good test a couple of weeks ago, and that sort of just keeps sticking out to me. It's if Duke can hang with Notre Dame, that's their one loss. Even on the road, logically they cover 14.5. I mean, that seems a little steep, in my opinion, for a football team that has proven hey, we can hang with the big boys. We beat Northwestern and UConn and shit like that, and NC State. But, they take in Notre Dame, giving them a game. I like Duke's product this year, so I'm going to take them plus 14.5. And I saw that on a few other cards, which gives me a little confidence here.
I love that. That Duke defense is legit, too. That's where it's that feels even better of a pick of. That's just too many points.
And that's the thing. You look at their past couple games, 3 points allowed against NC State, 21 points allowed against Notre Dame. Not a lot, all things considered. 7 points against UConn, 14 against Northwestern, and 7 apiece versus Clemson and Lafayette. That's 14.5 seems a lot for a team that plays good defense like that. So I don't know. I think that's I debated putting that as my lock of the week, but that's a real interesting pick for me here. So glad to see the fellows are riding it a little bit. To the Pac-12, just didn't think too hard about these. UCLA has put together a pretty solid season. Yes, Stanford had their heroic win over Colorado, but I do think it's because Colorado is starting to get exposed for what they are. They're a 4-3 team. They're okay at best. I don't know if any of you guys saw the SNL skit from last week of Keenan Thompson being Deion Sanders, and he's super funny.
That's pretty
skit.
good. Yeah,
unbelievable. He's like, we just bleed greatness, man. And Colin Joseph's like, well, you're 4-3. Like, what's up with that? It's like, well, it's hard to be undefeated, and then he just starts listing undefeated teams already. Great skit. UCLA -17. That's where I'm trying to get to here. I think UCLA's body of work is really strong. And then I'm going to go Oregon, right? I don't think there's any way that Oregon loses this football game, and I do think they're going to kick the absolute shit out of Washington State. Oregon, sour taste in their mouth. I don't know if any of you got to watch that game, but that might be the game of the year at this point. I caught a little bit of the middle chunk of it. Michael Penix just absolutely showed out. Bo Nix played a really good game too. I think he's going to have a sour taste in his mouth, after what just went down last week. So I think this is a perfect bounce back game for Oregon against a Washington State team that's good, but it's just next victim for Oregon. I think they've got something to prove. They want to be in that top 10. I think there's, I'm all in on Oregon -20 here. Another team I've been all in on all year has been Oklahoma, and honestly, I may keep picking them until they lose. I think this is a team that we could see in the college football playoff this year. The way they played against Texas 2 weeks ago now, incredible. And I'm not sure if you guys talked about it on the show last week, but absolutely incredible. And UCF, not incredible. 3-3. Again, just one that's like, hey, this is the next man up, and you're in our way. So Oklahoma at home is gonna crush them this year. What else do I have? There's some Big Ten action. Wisconsin -2.5 over Illinois. No real analysis there. And then Mizzou -7 over South Carolina. I think Mizzou's a good football team, guys. And I saw that on Cole's card too for later on. I won't take any analysis away from there. Mizzou's been flirting in the top 25 all year. I think this is the game that could potentially get them back if certain things, fall into their lap here. So I'll take Mizzou over South Carolina there. Air Force remains undefeated. I think Navy sucks, and I think -10.5 is maybe a little too little for Air Force, and they're going to go out in a good old-fashioned military battle. I know Basil has loved his share of those this year. Air Force going to come out on top, -10.5 over Navy. And those are the picks this week. We are doing locks here as well, correct?
Correct.
I will take William and Mary moneyline over Towson again. I'm 1-0 with William and Mary. Again, the theme this week is familiarity. What feels good to take, and William and Mary certainly seems like a good pick here. They're 4-2. They've strung together. They lost to Virginia. Elon, they got caught on a bad day, but Virginia was a game that, obviously they're probably going to lose FBS versus FCS. So that's fine. I saw Iowa -3, hopefully, or maybe I didn't, but on anyone else's card. But listen, we talked about good defensive teams, and I think Iowa's got a really strong defense. Yeah, the games are low scoring. They're ugly. The body of work is weird. But Minnesota seems, in looking at some stats here, it's a team that this matchup caters really well to the Hawkeyes with. So give me Iowa -3. I think their defense has been staunch all year. They've run into some tough competition and sort of held their own. I'm taking the Hawkeyes here for the lock of the week.
I love that. I think that's a fantastic card. A couple things that jumped out to me, more honestly, because I feel like I kind of overlap with you in a couple places. So before I kind of give away some of my stuff, I don't know if you guys felt like this, but it felt weird seeing this many double-digit spreads in Week 8, right? We're moving closer. Teams are plowing through their conferences, but I think a lot of these Power 5 leagues, I feel like things are really kind of settling early. I mean, I think there's a couple good division races in the SEC and the Big Ten right now. I think Iowa has proven that they're not just going to be, the Big Ten West team that the college football playoff hopeful trounces in the Big Ten championship game. But yeah, it feels a bit strange. But I do like that. One thing I really like the most is that Duke plus 14.5 over FSU. I really like FSU. I kind of wanted to take Duke because I just feel like, FSU has kind of shown that they're a good team that, walks the tightrope a little bit, in my opinion. But yeah, you're a braver man than I. Gilly, what you got for us?
Yeah, so I guess I'll lean right into you talking about Duke there. I am one of the Duke believers in the Blue Devils this week to at least cover. If this if we did our rankings based on ROI, I might even take the money line, but I'm a coward and I don't want to risk the loss, so I'll take the money line at plus 14, which is I think is where it's at still. I don't think I'm the only one going with Oklahoma. I saw the number at minus 18.5. I think Oklahoma's still rolling and has a bit to prove. And their quarterback there, low-key outside chance at being in the Heisman conversation. So I think that's another reason with Dylan Gabriel kind of cooking. I think they'll run up the score. So I think that's why I've got them over UCF pretty easily there. Hence why I also have the over in that game. Oklahoma UCF over 66 points. Then on my card, I have that twice on my card. I apologize for our list there. I just realized that. I do have Air Force minus 11 as well. I agree that Navy is just not that good of a team. I think Air Force rolls pretty easily, especially too knowing that they need to take care of business to kind of continue being in that top 25 conversation, right? I think that they've really kind of struggled to crack in. Now they're at 22, but I think that's part of it. And not for nothing, I was in Annapolis last weekend, and I can just say vibes are off. That no, I'm just kidding. It's no real source there, but I was in Annapolis. Then I do have Mizzou, South Carolina over 60. I think that Mizzou puts up points. I do like them. I was tempted to take them, but I'm going with the points just because I think that they score a lot, pretty quick pace of play, and their defense also lets up a lot of points. Let's just say that. Then I'm going back to the well with the team total overs. Michigan team total over 34.5. I just think that, especially with everything in the news this week with Harbaugh, and the fact that it's Michigan State, I think Michigan just tries to smoke them. I think Harbaugh in these big moments in the past, he's not afraid to really gut someone on the field and not worry about letting them kind of feel okay about it. And then I do have UNC team total over 40.5. And my lock of the week is going to be the game I just talked about, Michigan minus 24. Again, a little thick, but I just think it's the right spot. Maybe even more so with all this other stuff. And we already had that Harbaugh situation that a while back, Zimmer and I were kind of joking about with the self-imposed suspension and how they turned it into like a free Harbaugh situation kind of, despite it being self-imposed. So I think this team could rally around everything in the news and beat the crap out of their in-state rival.
Yeah, fantastic card. I feel like you've kind of become the king of the team totals this season. I think it's a fun prop to always take.
Thank you.
You talked about the Oklahoma quarterback and why you think he is a front runner for the Heisman. What about anything specific that you feel like that's kind of jumped out to you so far this season aside from that game against Texas?
You're right, and I think that's the big Heisman moment right now, right? If to build that conversation, and again, obviously, Michael Penix is by far the favorite right now, but I think that in the off chance, which doesn't seem that unlikely, that Oklahoma runs the table here, I feel like and again, they don't have a tough schedule to close out the season, to be honest with you, so it could come down to the Big 12 championship of them being undefeated or not. They've got UCF, Kansas, Oklahoma State, West Virginia, BYU, TCU. So that's where if you run the table and go undefeated, and if the Pac-12 kind of cannibalizes itself, and you've got Caleb Williams, Michael Penix, all kind of in that 1-2 loss category with a heck of a season statistic-wise, that's where a dark horse like Dylan Gabriel, I think, could kind of crack in. Pretty good ratio of touchdowns to interceptions at 16-2. He's taking care of the ball, not a lot of turnovers, which I think that would bode well for him in the Heisman voting.
Yeah, Gilly, I agree with you. I think obviously Michael Penix right now, just how he's been playing, is the clear favorite, as he should be. But I love Dylan Gabriel. I think he's been playing really well. And I still think Drake May from North Carolina could be in the conversation too. If you look at Dylan Gabriel and Drake May, I think Oklahoma has a 6th ranked offense right now in the country, and I think UNC is 8. Both of those offenses are above or ahead of the USC Trojans with Caleb Williams. So I know everyone was looking at him coming in the year. Will he repeat as the Heisman? I think we talked about this a lot on last week's show, how last week's game against Notre Dame was important for his Heisman Trophy candidacy. If he goes in that game and he blows them out and he balls out, I think he's still at the top of the list. But I think with what happened there, that opened the door for Michael Penix to take number 1. But I mean, I think that Dylan Gabriel and Drake May, they're still in the discussion. Like, this race isn't over. I think, those are three guys to watch as we get into the, final quarter of the season. And it's going to be interesting to see, who kind of takes the lead at the end.
Did anyone know if that Caleb Williams report on how he wants team ownership is true or false?
I think it's legit. It's not.
That's insane.
It's not.
That is insane.
I mean, who does he think he is? Like,
especially you can't. That report can't come out after you throw in 3 interceptions against Notre Dame.
That's the thing.
And look, like, they've given Tom Brady a hard time about owning teams. He's the GOAT. I mean, if there's going to be any player right now that gets ownership in a team, I would say it's probably going to be Mahomes, and he's not getting that. So, I mean, Caleb Williams, great player, probably going to be the number 1 pick in the draft, but he's high if he thinks he's getting, ownership stock in any of these 32 NFL franchises.
Imagine the rift in the locker room if that actually, like, again, it's not even within, I think the NFL has said it's not even allowed. Like, there's no structure for that to be a thing. Yeah,
right? Not only do the owners not want that, like a player having ownership in a team, but all the other players in the NFL would be absolutely bullshit, and it would be a nightmare for the NFLPA, I think.
My hot take is I think he stays another year.
Potentially. I mean,
I think slate of teams at the top, is that why you think? Or
between the slate of teams on top and like how much money he can continue to pull.
Yeah, I mean, that would be the craziest thing. I wouldn't be shocked if that's the case, Tondo. Hopefully the Pats get him though, because we suck.
That's correct.
Do you think that he would agree? That's the only thing I'm concerned about.
There's no way.
Are we becoming a team that they'd be like, I'll go back? That's not.
If I were him, I'd go back to LA for another year rather than come up to New England.
I mean, and he's kind of pigeonholed too, because if you're taking the top 5 spots in its moment, 2 of those spots are owned by the Bears.
Right.
So it's like, are you going to Chicago, which is not the worst situation, I would say, but it's not great. And
do you guys feel like with Caleb? Sorry. Do you guys feel like with Caleb Williams too? It's like one of those things where, I also agree that I think, even for a player as good as him, one of the best, he's probably going to be one of the best number 1 draft picks, of the decade probably. But I know that, even a guy like him asking for, an ownership stake in a rookie contract is completely, out of the ballpark in terms of being realistic. Don't you feel like that was kind of coming eventually? And it's kind of good that we're getting that out of the way now.
I think it just has to come from the right person. Like if Tom Brady said that, it'd be like, all right, respectable. Like the guy's done a lot, but
I don't know. I think even with Tom Brady, I don't even think, it's nothing against Caleb Williams. It's like, you know what? Like I kind of respect him for asking, but I just think, it's good that we're, people, I've kind of given the hard no up front. Because look, even Tom Brady, right? you know, say, deflate gate, spy gate, all that stuff out of the way. I think, you gotta hope that a player is trying to do the most fair and most responsible thing, right? When it comes to, winning for their team. What happens if somehow a player does get, an ownership stake in their contract and then is traded a couple years later or decides to sign somewhere else? I mean, I know the expectation is you become an owner and you're with that team for the rest of your career, but you never know. I mean, it's like, it's really impossible. Brady left. I mean, people thought he was going to be a Patriot for life, and he went to Tampa Bay for 3 years. So it's like, I just think, I have a lot of respect for these players for, valuing themselves that high. And, I would value them that high as well, but it's just, it's a little.
Buy a soccer team.
Yeah.
Buy a soccer team in the city you get drafted in, like Patrick Mahomes. I mean, Patrick Mahomes, I think, owns the part of the Royals, the soccer team, and then he's trying to bring expansion stuff to Kansas City. So I respect that.
Yeah, and then the day you retire, get 5%. Yeah, I think I think that'll get squashed pretty quickly.
Hazel, to your point, though, I was going to say, too, I think it's good that it's coming out now rather than, March, April, when the draft is, just on the horizon. Like, let's get this story out of the way now. It's still the middle of the season. It might be a distraction to him and USC a little bit, but I don't think it's going to be too much of a distraction for them. But I think it's better for this to be out there now rather than right ahead of the draft and having it be, on ESPN every day, them talking about, is Caleb Williams going to be a, potential owner in the team that drafts him? Like,
yeah.
Or tinfoil hat on. We've spent more time talking about Caleb Williams owning an NFL team than his 3 interceptions against Notre Dame last week.
Yeah, it's true.
No one's talking about that right now.
Smart. That's a smart move. You know what? I've heard enough. I'm adding USC team total over 30.5 to my card. Caleb Williams going to come out firing and say, I'm going to change the conversation right now.
I'm glad to know that after all this discourse, that's where we land. It's like, all right, cool. Hammer the over on team total for USC.
I'm dead serious.
No, that's what I figured. Like, the scary part is you're dead serious.
30.5 seems kind of low. They've been
that is a little low.
Obviously, Notre Dame, they only put up 20, but he's got to stay in the conversation for the Heisman for him to back up that type of talk that we're talking about that he's trying to command. But again, good point too. If I say it, because it's just like thinking about the like, imagine like a draft pick that does not work out, even a number 1 pick, like. The Raiders had to like buy out Jamarcus Russell of his 5% ownership when it doesn't work out, where he's just going to be part of ownership forever. That'd be so funny. I almost kind of wish it would happen just for that, of just like, you've got to live with this guy or buy him out to be away from your franchise. But,
yeah, and I remember like 7 or 8 years ago, or maybe not that long ago, but I feel like there was rumblings of LeBron talking about buying a stake in the Sacramento Kings. I don't know if you guys remember this, but it's like, LeBron, you're on the Cavs, or maybe if it was a little bit earlier, like, you're on the Heat. Like, you can't like play against a team. You're gonna play them twice a year. You can't play a team that you got an ownership stake in. And like, I'm not, and it's like, and again, it's like, even if you could claim fair play all you want, but at the end of the day, it's and I think a lot of players would play fair, because I think players want to, like, there are a lot of players who just want to win more than whatever the financial benefits of them playing any other way is. But it's like, you can never avoid that skepticism if you have a stake in a team while you're a player. So it's just like, I'm proud of us talking about it now, tinfoil hat or not, because I just feel like it's just such an open and shut case that we're not even going to be thinking about it next week. Yeah,
it leads to a whole nother issue too. And I know we got to stop talking about this, but like, all the NFL players right now that are getting in trouble for like gambling, right? Like, on other teams, and they're getting screwed for it. Like, it's kind of the same situation. Like, if you have ownership in one team and you're end up not playing for them, or however that would work out, it's kind of a similar scenario. It's I'm no attorney, but it seems like a direct conflict of interest. So I just don't think it's ever going to happen realistically.
Yeah. And it's good that we're talking about it now because, again, like with the whole, with sign stealing and technology and all that stuff, it's like with something like this, you got to get it down on paper. You got to have people sit down and figure out what's best for the players, for the teams, for the fan bases, right? Closing the book on that. I feel like we've got a lot. We can give all of our thoughts another time, but I'm going to go into my card. My card's a little short this week. I have a little bit of a parlay that I think is kind of fun. So I'm going to start off with my locks. I'm going to start off with my FBS lock of the week. I'm also going Air Force minus 10.5. This is their first time this is the first matchup this season of the Commander-in-Chief's trophy, which is one of my favorite rivalry trophies because it's one of the only ones we see in college football that is contested between 3 teams. So if you're one of those teams and you can beat the other out of Army, Navy, and Air Force, you win the trophy. If everyone kind of beats each other in a triangle of sadness, then they share the trophy. So we've got our first matchup this week between Air Force and Navy. I think Air Force is by far the clear favorite to win the trophy this year. This would be their first time winning the trophy in back-to-back years since 2010, 2011. Obviously, they are the reigning champions of the Commander-in-Chief's trophy. One stat, I feel like we've kind of already gone into why Air Force is the better team. A really fun stat that I think it's cool about this Air Force team. When going for it on 4th down, this is according to teamrankings.com. When going for it on 4th down, they are 8 for 11 tries. So that's pretty cool. My FCS lock of the week. I think I went with these guys last week, but I really like them. And that's Harvard. I think we should be on Harvard undefeated watch. They are the clear favorites in the Ivy League this year. They are really good. They beat down on Howard last week. They got a really good win against Holy Cross. And this week they're playing Princeton, one of the teams that kind of birthed college football along with Rutgers. And I think they're gonna trounce them. I think their defense is excellent. And I would not be surprised if, especially because like I've complained about all the time because they don't play in the FCS playoffs, they are probably going to finish the year as Ivy League champions and undefeated. For my standard picks, I'm going to go, aside from noticing a lot of double-digit spreads this week, I noticed there are a lot of home dogs. Did you guys notice this as well? Especially in the MAC. So I'm going to do a little home dog parlay, and that is Florida Atlantic plus 2.5, New Mexico money line. The point spread was Hawaii -1. I feel like if you're going to do a 1-point spread, you might as well just go money line. And I'm putting on a parlay, so it makes it a little tougher. So Florida Atlantic plus 2.5, New Mexico money line, and Miami of Ohio plus 2. Miami of Ohio is, one of those teams that was on the graphic. They've already clinched bowl eligibility. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but this is a really good year for Ohio teams. We've already got Toledo on there. We've got Ohio State on there, obviously. The birthplace of professional football. MAC teams this year are 22-12 at home. And Miami, Ohio's quarterback, Brett Gabbert, who, you might recognize that last name. He's the younger brother of Blaine Gabbert, who's currently in the NFL. He is 22nd in the country in passer rating at 161.9. So I like Miami, Ohio this week. Obviously going to hold off on our game of the week. Let's hand it over to you, Cole.
Yeah, so, I have a lot of the same picks that you guys have, so I'll just kind of rattle these off. But Air Force, I do want to talk a little bit about. I have them also -10.5 against Navy. Look, Air Force, really impressive. I think they're kind of going under the radar this year of how good they really are. When you look at this team, they have the 3rd best-ranked defense in the entire country in the FBS, which is pretty impressive when you look at some of these teams and the defenses that they have. They have the number 1 rushing offense. That's not too surprising just because of the type of offense they run, but still to be number 1, pretty good. number one, time of possession. I mean, that's the biggest thing when it comes to football. Time possession, holding on the ball and not turning the ball over. So, when you have the ball more, you're going to win more. So that's a good stat for them. They are also they have the fewest penalties. They are the least penalized team in the entire FBS. Now, that probably has something to do with being a military academy. They're, pretty,
disciplined
on top of their shit and disciplined. Yeah. But, it just shows what type of team this is, how they're coached. So, I like them, and they've been good the past 2 years. I mean, they've finished the last 2 seasons 10-3 each year in the Mountain West. And, they've gone to bowl games and they've won both bowl games the last 2 years. And it's not against like no-name teams. They've beaten Louisville and Baylor back-to-back years in bowl games. So, I mean, Air Force is legit. They should probably get more respect and be talked about more than they are. But I think just because they are in the military academy, they kind of go under the radar. But I like them this week a lot against Navy. I'll take them 10.5. I got Rutgers -5 over Indiana. Rutgers I've been picking them a lot this year, and they've been doing pretty well. I did pick them last week against Michigan State, and they didn't cover. They did end up winning only by 3. I think the spread was like 4.5. So that was kind of a tough beat, but I think they're a good team. They've only lost to Wisconsin and Michigan this year. So, I like them against Indiana -5. That's not too many. So I'm going to take them there. I have Wisconsin -2.5 over Illinois. Wisconsin had a tough loss last week against Iowa. I think they bounced back against Illinois this week. They're undefeated when they're scoring more than 23 points in a game. So, just over 3 scores a game. Last week they only put up 6 against that Iowa defense. That's not going to get it done against many teams in the country. So I think they bounce back offensively this week, and 2.5 against an Illinois team. I just think that's too small. So I'm going to take Wisconsin and the Badgers there. I also have Duke +14.5. I'm riding the Blue Devils with you guys. Really love this team. Been watching them a lot this year. Really impressed with what they're doing. I think a big part of this spread and what's going to happen is going to be determined whether Riley Leonard comes back and plays this week from his injury. I think if he's in the game, I mean, like Gilly said, I kind of like them to win money line. I think Florida State is a good team, but this year they've shown, especially in ACC play, that they've had some tight games. I mean, they almost lost to BC, which was probably a fluke, but 2-point game there. They lost to Clemson in overtime. So I just feel like, FSU is asking for an upset, and I think Duke may be the team to give it to them. So 14.5, a lot of points. I'm going to take Duke there. I like them. My FBS lock of the week, I have Mizzou -7 over the South Carolina Gamecocks. Another team that's been pretty impressive. They had a big win against Kentucky last week. They're really playing well in the SEC. They're averaging about 34 points a game. So, putting up a lot of points. Someone mentioned on the show they're also giving up a lot of points. That worries me a little bit, but I like them a touchdown over South Carolina. I think they're at home. I think they're riding high off the win against Kentucky last week. And look, after this week against South Carolina, they have a pretty tough schedule slate of games ahead. They still have to play Georgia, Tennessee, and Florida. And right now in the SEC, in their division, that's pretty tight. So, if they win those games, they beat Georgia somehow, or if they beat Tennessee, Florida, they could potentially be in the SEC championship conversation. Now, I don't think they're necessarily going to beat Georgia, but, the window is there for them. If they lose against South Carolina this week, forget it. It's over, right? So I think it's kind of a must win for them to remain in the discussion. So I'm going to take them as my FBS lock. And then my FCS lock, I'm riding with you, Basil. I'm going with the Harvard Crimson. Like you said, unbelievable year they're having in Cambridge there. I don't know. Their quarterback, Charles DePrima, he's a junior. He's been lighting it up. He's having a really good year. When they played Cornell this year, he ran for 3 touchdowns and passed for 3 touchdowns in one game. I know Cornell's not really the best, opponent to look at, but they're playing well. Like you said, they have some quality wins. Holy Cross last week, they crushed Howard. And I just don't think Princeton really is having that great of a year. I mean, the Bryant Bulldogs beat them. So, that's that. So I'm going to take Harvard money line as my FCS lock, and I'll hold off on game of the week for now.
Love it. Fantastic card. Mizzou being the team to come out of the SEC East, to come out of the SEC and challenge Georgia would be insane. But look, I'm not throwing anything out the window here. Tondo, what you got for us?
So this was a week that I really didn't love that much, so I overcompensated and threw a lot on the card. But there are picks that I will like, such as my FCS lock of the week, which I also am riding Harvard money line. Have been watching a lot of Suits lately, so I've been following the signs.
Harvey Specter, baby.
A lot of Crimson right now. They've been talking about the Harvard way, so got to ride the money line here. My FBS lock is going to be Oklahoma minus 19. I know a few people have that on the card. Too dominant over UCF. Time to pull down their banner that they were the world champions, and Oklahoma comes in and stomps it down. I also do have Duke plus 14.5, and I have Air Force minus 11. I will be taking the under at 34.5 there. I think it's probably going to be a 31-0 game. I don't think Navy will put up a point, but it's the Service Academy unders, and I wish it was a little bit higher, but they're notoriously very, very low. In that over-under train, I'm going to go two teams that don't score a lot of points, Minnesota and Iowa under 32.5, and then a battle down in Texas versus Houston over 61. I have Utah plus 7 over USC. I do think USC wins that game. They can't go back-to-back losses, but I think the Utes do put up a fight, especially with the Pac-12 now, having some shuffle, and it's Washington's conference to lose. I think Utah definitely wants to, put their name out there. I have Alabama winning, but Tennessee covering 9 points. And then my biggest skepticism, but I believe in it because I think this team is sneaky in terms of covering, Arizona State plus 26.5 versus Washington.
Sneaky.
It's a lot of points.
I kind of like it.
I think that's if I had to pick one that I'm actually confident on, it's the 26.5 cover by Arizona State. Washington, they're riding a high. They're in unfamiliar territory right now, and between Heisman watch, Pac-12 watch, college football playoff watch, this could be one where they'll win, but I think they come out a little sloppy.
Yeah, I like that. That's a really fun card. I do love the Suits reference. I think it's very fitting, right? Like three non-Harvard guys riding for Harvard. So it's like
yeah, because I couldn't get in.
So we want to feel better. Wicked smart with these picks.
And ever since Basil mentioned that last year that they can't, they're not bowl eligible.
No, they're not. Well, they're not bowl eligible because they're not in the FBS, but they have never played in the. They don't play in the FCS playoffs. They just refuse.
It's just stupid. They should change.
Actually,
that.
You know what? The Patriot League refused to do that until the 90s. So it wasn't very uncommon, but they just treat they just focus on winning the Ivy League championship, which I think is fun, but also at the same time, as I think in FCS football, I think FCS football has been so top heavy over these last couple of years. So I think in the way that the seasons are structured for that subdivision, I do think winning your conference is a huge achievement. Because it's a gauntlet you got to go through. I mean, if you look at the Patriot League, I think, playing through the Patriot League and trying to win it every single year is really tough. You just can't make mistakes, right? But at the same time, it's I think it'd be fun. I don't know. Whatever. They're nerds. I was gonna say, if they could play in the college football playoff, the FCS playoff, they might actually be able to get more athletes to that school rather than just, the nerd herd. But, well, the other thing too is that they don't give athletic scholarships.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So it's it's not there isn't really like that is an incentive,
That's not their target market, though.
But yeah, they're not. They're I don't know. I guess
Not for nothing though, but those Ivies they figure out their ways to get kids in that may not have the acumen on their own, right? So they I don't know. I just going through that process from as a student athlete and having some friends that were like, wait a second, Brown's going to give you an academic scholarship full ride? That doesn't make sense. So I will. That's the only 2 cents I have to add there.
And it always,
Harvard.
I always find it funny when, like, especially in college basketball, when people in the Ivies transfer out. It's like, dude, you're not Jeremy Lin going to have your Lin Saninu moment on the Knicks. Take the degree and walk, my guy. Just take the degree. You played on the sports team. You can tell your grandkids, and you have
connections for life.
degree.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
No, you're right. I do agree with that.
Largest endowment fundsy too. So
it's a no-brainer.
Yeah,
look at us. We're like Ivy League. We sound like Ivy League students right now.
All right, let's get into some good stuff. Let's get into our game of the week. And I think honestly, I think this is always one of my favorite matchups every year. It's a Big Ten matchup. It has huge implications for the Big Ten championship game and could have big implications this year more than ever for the college football playoff. And that is Ohio State versus Penn State. This is a matchup, this is a very, it's a historic meeting, between these two teams. I mean, obviously they've been playing each other on an almost regular basis since 1912, but they haven't really played on a consistent basis. They haven't played in the same conference until 1993, when, every year after that, they've played each other every single year. And in years past, I really think that it's kind of been, Penn State kind of coming up and having that moment, but they just weren't prepared enough, and they lost to Ohio State, as Ohio State was always looking for the playoff, right? They were always, Penn State was, kind of floating around the top 10, top 15, but they were never really in the prime position where a win against Ohio State would propel them to that next level. Their last win against Ohio State was in 2016, which, can anybody give me the nickname that this game has garnered based on how Penn State won? Time. The block 6. Penn State obviously blocked a field goal, an Ohio State attempt at a field goal, and ran it in for a touchdown, very akin to the way that the Iron Bowl ended back in 2013. But again, even a win like that against Ohio State, they were not in prime position yet to be a college football playoff team. And now more than ever, they are. This is the most important meeting between these two schools potentially ever. So, guys, starting off with you, Jake, how do you think this game's going to go, and what's your pick? Is it money line? Is it a team against a spread, or are you playing it safe with the score total?
I have sat with this for so long, and I don't have a good answer for how this game's going to go, other than it's going to be close. I'm erring sort of on the side of a shootout. I know Penn State, yes, they played UMass last week, but it was 63-0, right? And if you look at their track record all year, I mean, these are some big boy wins. These are taking teams to the woodshed. And I look back and I try to find okay, what's the best team they played recently, or this year, I should say. They had a fantastic defensive effort against Iowa. That was that 31-0 game. They had a solid 38-15 win against a team like West Virginia, who I think is actually pretty solid. They're turning in a decent year so far. And some part of me, it's telling me, maybe against all instincts, that this game's going to be really close, right? I think a lot of people are all in on Ohio State, but I just can't overlook the fact that this Penn State team is just so efficient on offense. So it's a simple reason, but it's that one that's going to cause me to take Penn State plus 4.5. And I think a lot of the room is sort of with me here that Penn State's going to keep it close. I don't know that they win this game, but I have a really strong feeling that they're going to keep it really close. So I'm taking the Nittanies here.
Gilly, what you got for us?
Yeah, no, I think a lot of good points there. I also do have Penn State 4.5 to get out in front of that. I love this. I think this is one of my favorite plays of the year so far, to be honest with you. I just think that even with last year, and again, how many games in a row? Has it 6 in a row that they've lost to Ohio State? But that being said, James Franklin's been around. I think his first 2 or 3 years there, he stole 2 in his first 3 years, I believe. Um, which is, you know what I mean? It's not like this is completely foreign to him, of beating Ohio State. On top of that, last year, if you remember, for about 3.5 quarters, it was neck and neck in this game. And I think I bet on Penn State at the time, so I guess I have a skewed view a little bit. But all of a sudden, Ohio State kind of retook the lead from what I recall, and then all of a sudden a pick six happened, and the game kind of blew open, and it was kind of over after that. But again, that's 6 losses in a row. You'd think that it would be a dejected team. I think that this Penn State team knows they're special. Ohio State not looking great this year. I know. I feel like everyone. It's almost like the one of those phenomenon where it's like everyone wants to say a team is done before they're done, and Ohio State sometimes is that team. Just like with Alabama, right? I feel like for years it's like Saban's cooked, it's over, because everyone wants to be the first one to say it. Ohio State kind of floundering in that territory for me. So yeah, Penn State 4.5. I love it.
Love it. Speaking of covering, Penn State has covered the last 2 meetings between these 2 schools. Cole, what you got for us?
Yeah, I'm on the same train. I like Penn State. This team, year in and year out, it seems like they're right there, and they just can't get over that hump and get into the college football playoff. I don't know if this is their year or not, but they're looking pretty good, and I feel good about them. Jake mentioned how their offense has been very efficient. Their defense is the number 1 defense in the country right now. They are averaging less than 200 yards per game total offense, which is kind of unbelievable. They're number 2 in turnover margin, plus 10. I think they've given up the ball 3 times on offense and have caused 13 turnovers. Their defense, they get after it. I think that is going to be the key in this game. I think we saw in the Ohio State Notre Dame game, Notre Dame kind of a similar defense. They're gritty, and Ohio State, rather, they struggled with that. For the majority of that game, they did at the end kind of just squeak it out, but I think Penn State is built to kind of play the entire game and potentially get that victory. They've been blowing teams out, so I like them. And then when you just take a look at both these teams' quarterbacks, right? You have Kyle McCord for Ohio State, and then Drew Aller, who's only a sophomore at Penn State, which is kind of crazy. Drew Aller, I think, is the better quarterback here, in my opinion. He's having a great year. He's thrown for 12 touchdowns, hasn't thrown an interception yet, knock on wood. If he can continue to do that, the defense does their thing. I think, like these guys have been saying, I think it's going to be a close, very close game. I do disagree with Zimmer. I don't think it's going to be a shootout. I think it's going to be pretty low scoring. I see like 2017, that type of game, 17-14 maybe. But yeah, I think it's going to be close. I like Penn State within 4.5, and I'm rooting for them. Why not? Ohio State has been there. We've seen them. I'd like to see Penn State in the Big Ten and try and make a run. So go Nittany Lions.
Love it, Tondo.
Same exact thing. I do think Penn State wins this game. I'm just taking the spread here. I think Penn State's a top 4 team in college football, and for them to showcase that, you got to win this week. Not to say that Ohio State doesn't deserve to be there. Obviously, the win over Notre Dame at the buzzer, definitely boosts their standings. But in terms of Ohio State, I think they've underperformed all season. I'm very curious about Ohio State versus Michigan come a couple weeks, but. Focusing on this week, I think Nittany Lions cover it. I think they also win it. But for picks purposes, just to keep my record afloat, we're going to take the spread.
I like it. Yeah, and look, I think I'm going to do it too. I'm going to go Penn State plus 4.5. I think as we've kind of explain in a lot of different ways. It's really simple, right? The key word for this matchup is pressure. Who's under the most pressure? What kind of pressure are these teams under? With Ohio State, I think it's a lot more, and it's a lot more pressure, and it's a lot more specific into what it is, right? Like, look, they've been the perennial college football playoff team, aside from maybe Alabama. I would actually, definitely aside from Alabama. Since the inception of the college football playoff, right? It's like every single year, it's their spot to lose, and their biggest test year after year has often been Penn State. Penn State, obviously, they've had their years. They've tried to come up, and they've always come up short. And yes, while I think this is their best chance to do it, and that does give them some unique pressure of their own, I think that kind of puts the ball in their court, right, to kind of set how this matchup goes. This defense is excellent. I think they're going to be really good at making Ohio State kind of struggle to get balls deep. I think their secondary is really good, and because of that, because Ohio State's not going to be able to get passes deep, their run game, which I don't think is really stood the test this year, is going to have a lot of work cut out for them, and I think that's going to be where Penn State really takes control of this game. So I'm going to take the money line. I guess I don't know. Does it make sense to pick the spread and the money line? I guess I'll just take the money line with Penn State. I think it'll be like a 28-24 game, maybe even lower, like a 24-21, pretty, maybe similar to the block 6, but I think the Nittany Lions come out on top in this one.
I think they have the better coach too. I'll say that. James Franklin, what he's done at Penn State is really kind of remarkable. You got to remember he's been there for so long that you forget, but they had that whole Joe Paterno scandal, right, in the mid 2010s or whatever. And then Bill O'Brien came in and was there for, a cup of coffee. He was in and out at Penn State. And it was kind of like what Penn State historically has been this powerhouse in the Big Ten. And it was, everyone kind of thought like, what's going to happen to them? Are they going to fall off? Are they going to be like irrelevant now? After this huge scandal, how's that going to, affect their recruiting and all that? And James Franklin came over from Vanderbilt, and he's kind of made a home for himself at Penn State. And, he's done unbelievable there. And I just think he's a better coach than Ryan Day, honestly. I think Ryan Day's had more talented teams, but James Franklin's done more with his teams. I think he's they both have produced great NFL talent. That's just kind of the universities that they're at. But I don't know. I just think I like James Franklin. I think he's a great coach. He's been really successful there, and I'm rooting for the guy. So.
Out of curiosity, I do have a question for the group here, because I just realized, because I feel like in my rankings and votings and whatnot, there's no secret. Since week 2, I've had Penn State ahead of Ohio State in our rankings. I think it was that the first half against Youngstown State, where Ohio State was only up. I think they were tied 7-all, and then barely were 14-7 at the half, that's the moment where I started believing Penn State over them. And do any of you guys also have Penn State ahead of Ohio State as of right now in your rankings? No?
Mentally, yes.
No.
Physically, no.
Okay.
I had Ohio State at 5 and Penn State right behind them this week.
Okay.
Yeah, Gilly, I'm looking at them right now. You are right now the only person.
All right, never mind then. I guess that's a moot point. I was just curious. That makes sense. No one else is picking them money line, I guess. But
it's close. I mean, look, I'll pull up the consensus top 25 right here. I mean, I don't think any of us, they're 6th right now. I really don't think any of us have them lower than 6th. Yeah,
I'll put them ahead of Ohio State if they win this week. That's for sure.
No, that's fair. That's fair. No, they. Yeah. I was just curious.
I think I'm 6 for them. I think they've been comfortably either 6 or 5. I can't recall, but one of those. I mean, if they win, they're very much in. Maybe top 3 for me, but I don't know. Depends on how it all shakes out.
Yeah, you had them at 5th, Jake, and actually, sorry, Tondo and Cole, you guys had them at 7th this week.
Did I?
So, yeah. So
who did I have? Who did I have? Oklahoma above them.
You had your top. I'll just go down. Your top 5 was Michigan, Georgia, Ohio State, Florida State, Washington, and then Oklahoma at 6.
Who
I like
did I
Washington
have,
up there,
Basil? What was mine?
Your top 7 was Georgia, Michigan. Oh yeah, by the way, Tano, you were the only person that had Michigan at number 1. As you know, some of you might be seeing that little one there next to Michigan. Cole, you had Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State, Florida State, Washington, Oklahoma, Penn State. So you actually got the top 5 like right on the money,
Wow.
which is funny. But yeah, this might be the most important game, right, for rankings. It's going to be, I have a good feeling that no matter what happens here with, Ohio State, Florida State, Washington, Penn State, we're probably going to see another shakeup in our projected playoff teams. So it's going to be a great week. I think we just gave you guys some great cards. So hopefully you can take that and help increase your own win totals this year. But yeah, until then, keep checking us out on House Enterprise on Twitter, house-enterprise/the blog, where we're putting out great college football coverage, college basketball coverage, and anything else we really feel like talking about. And keep following all of us on Twitter. We'll keep tagging ourselves in the college football top 25. And until then, we'll see you guys next time.